When people ask me what the hardest part of getting rich is, I always tell them the same thing. It's not the last million, it's the first 100,000. That first 100,000 will test everything inside you. Your patience, your habits, your discipline, your ability to stay bored when the world tells you to chase excitement. It's the steepest hill you'll ever climb. But once you get there, something remarkable happens. Gravity starts working for you instead of against you. See, in the beginning, you're pushing the rock uphill with nothing but your own hands. Every dollar feels heavy. Every mistake feels fatal. Every month feels slow. You're working for money, and money isn't working for you yet. It's exhausting, and that's why most people quit before the magic happens. They don't realize that once you cross that first threshold, that first 100,000, the game flips. After that, your money starts whispering back. It starts helping. I remember when I was a young man, I used to calculate compound interest by hand. I'd write out the numbers in a notebook and think, if I can just get to 100,000, the next part will take care of itself. Because once you hit that number, your investments start doing what you've been doing for years, working. They earn while you sleep. And when you add time to that equation, the results become unstoppable. But getting there, that's the hard part. The first 100,000 requires the same effort as the next 900,000 combined. That's because at the beginning, you're not just building capital. You're building character. You're learning to delay gratification, to live below your means, to resist every shortcut that promises to get you there faster but secretly takes you backward. Most people never make it because they're impatient. They want fireworks, not progress. But real wealth doesn't announce itself. It grows in silence in the background in months and years when you think nothing's happening. It's like watching grass grow, invisible until it isn't. The first 100,000 is like a test of faith. You invest, you save, you tighten your belt, and nothing seems to change. Your bank balance inches forward. You start wondering if it's worth it. You compare yourself to others who seem miles ahead, and the temptation to quit creeps in. That's when most people lose. Not to failure, but to fatigue. But if you can endure that stretch, if you can keep your head down, ignore the noise, and stay consistent, you'll cross a line most people never do. Because the day you reach your first 100,000, you stop being just a worker. You become a partner with time. Money has a strange personality. It's lazy at first. It doesn't trust you. It wants to see if you're serious. It needs proof that you'll treat it with respect, that you won't waste it or panic when things get rough. But once you've shown consistency, once you've proved you can manage it, money starts trusting you. It starts working harder than you do. You see, the first 100,000 comes from effort. The next comes from momentum. And momentum is powerful. It's not emotional. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't care about market crashes or politics. It just compounds quietly while the rest of the world is distracted. That's what I tell young people. Stop chasing big wins. Chase consistency. The man who saves a little every month for 10 years will beat the genius who tries to time the market every day. Because time, not talent, is the real multiplier. When you're starting from zero, your habits matter more than your returns. Even if you only earn 5%, if you're disciplined, that money will grow faster than someone chasing 20% without patience. The secret isn't in the numbers. It's in the behavior. The market rewards emotional control far more than intelligence. In your 20s and 30s, the first 100,000 is supposed to hurt. It's supposed to feel like you're giving everything for almost nothing. But that pain is what makes you dangerous later. Because once you've learned to live below your means, no one can ever take that power away from you. Inflation can rise, markets can fall, but discipline compounds forever. When I was starting out, I didn't own much. I read, I worked, I saved. I didn't need luxury because I was building leverage. Every dollar I didn't spend was a worker I hired for life. That's how I saw it. I wasn't depriving myself. I was recruiting soldiers. And someday, those soldiers would fight for me. It's the same for anyone trying to reach that first 100,000. You have to see money not as paper, but as people. Each dollar is a tiny worker. Some will work harder than others, but all of them will work if you keep them employed. Let them earn dividends, interest, rent. Don't fire them by spending them on things that rust or fade. The first stage of wealth is about accumulation. The second stage is about multiplication. The problem is you can't multiply what you never accumulate. Everyone wants to talk about compounding, but compounding doesn't work on zero. It needs a seed. That seed is your first 100,000. Once you planted it, you'll understand why the next stage feels easier. It's not that life suddenly changes. It's that your perspective does. You start noticing opportunities you were blinded before. You start valuing stability over excitement. You stop chasing everything that moves and start nurturing what grows. That's why I always say, if you can build your first 100,000 the hard way, every dollar after that will come easier because you'll never go back to the chaos of before. You'll understand that wealth isn't made in windfalls. It's made in rhythm, and rhythm is born from boredom. The same actions repeated long enough create miracles. Most people can't handle boredom. They need stimulation, new ideas, new trends. But the boring investor wins because he stays consistent while the clever one gets distracted. The first 100,000 will teach you that. It will humble you. It will frustrate you. But it will also prepare you for everything that comes after. Once you reach it, you'll feel something shift inside. You'll realize you don't need to chase anymore. The compounding has begun, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't need motivation. It just works quietly, endlessly, as long as you let it. That's when you understand why the first 100,000 is hard and the next is easy, because now you're no longer alone in the effort. You have help. The system is finally on your side. The irony of the first 100,000 is that it demands everything from you at the exact time you have the least to give. When you're young, you don't have capital, connections, or certainty. You're trying to build all three from scratch. Every bill feels like an enemy. Every investment feels like a risk. Every dollar saved feels microscopic compared to your goals. But that's exactly why it's such a valuable test, because what you build during that phase isn't just financial discipline, it's emotional armor. Once you reach $100,000, that armor stays with you forever. You stop being impressed by instant success. You stop panicking at temporary losses. You start trusting time more than trends. That's why I tell people the journey to your first $100,000 isn't about wealth, it's about wisdom. It's easy to read about compounding and nod along. It's much harder to live through the years when it feels like compounding isn't doing anything. You'll save for months, maybe years, and the numbers will crawl. You'll watch other people spend freely, travel, upgrade, and you'll start to wonder if you're the fool. But you're not. You're building something invisible, a base. And a base is what makes everything else possible. When you have no base, every crisis is fatal. One emergency, one bad month, one mistake, and you're back to zero. But when you have that first $100,000, you stop being fragile. You start having options. You stop reacting and start planning. The world looks different because now you're playing from a position of strength. Think of it like climbing a mountain. The first 100,000 is the steepest part of the slope. You're climbing on your hands. Every step burns. Every inch feels impossible. But then once you hit that first plateau, you realize you've gained leverage. The incline softens. The air clears. Suddenly your money starts climbing with you. Here's the math people forget. At $100,000, even a modest 7% return gives you $7,000 a year. That's not life-changing, but it's momentum. And momentum compounds. The next year, that $7,000 earns $490. Then the next year, $525 more. It's small, but it's steady. You start seeing the curve tilt upward. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, slow at first, then unstoppable. But that's why the early stage is so brutal. You're pushing the snowball uphill. Every inch requires effort. Every paycheck feels like it disappears the moment it arrives. You'll want to quit. Everyone does. And that's the moment that separates the wealthy from the wishful. The wealthy push a little longer. They keep stacking. They understand that what feels pointless today will feel effortless tomorrow. When I was in my 20s, I didn't think in millions. I thought in compounding cycles. I told myself, if I can reach $100,000, time will take over from there. And it did. Because once you have that foundation, you can afford to let patience do the work. You see, wealth isn't built by doing amazing things once. It's built by doing ordinary things consistently. Save, invest, repeat. It sounds simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. The world will tempt you with shortcuts every single day. But shortcuts are just longer paths in disguise. They steal time, and time is the only real currency of compounding. That's why I tell young investors, your first $100,000 isn't just money. It's a mindset. It's the proof that you can delay gratification. And once you've proven that, the rest becomes mechanical. The habits are built. The systems are running. You don't have to think about saving anymore. It becomes automatic. But here's what most people never understand. Your first 100,000 is also the cheapest you'll ever buy it. After that, you'll have more obligations, more distractions, more temptations. The earlier you build it, the more powerful it becomes. A dollar saved at 20 is worth 10 saved at 40. The math is ruthless, but also fair. Time rewards the disciplined and punishes the distracted. The funny thing is everyone wants to learn how to invest, but very few want to learn how to save. They want strategy without sacrifice, but without sacrifice, there's no surplus. Without surplus, there's nothing to invest. And without investment, there's no freedom. That's why I say the first $100,000 will feel like crawling through mud, but the mud is where you learn balance. You learn not to slip. You learn to move forward even when progress is invisible. You learn to respect the process instead of resenting it. You'll have months where the market falls and you'll feel like you're going backward. You'll have months where expenses explode and savings vanish. But that's part of the test, because wealth doesn't reward perfection. It rewards endurance. The person who survives the dull years, the slow grind, is the one who gets to experience the magic years. Because at some point, the math flips. Suddenly, your investments start earning more than you contribute. The snowball is rolling on its own, and you realize you've crossed a threshold you can never unlearn. That's why after the first $100,000, the rest feels easier. Not because life changes dramatically, but because your perspective does. You finally see how time works. You stop forcing results. You start respecting patience. You stop treating wealth like a finish line and start treating it like a process. Once you internalize that, money becomes almost boring, and boring is where the real growth happens. The people who try to make investing exciting usually make it expensive. The ones who let it be boring end up free. So when you're saving that first $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, understand that it's supposed to feel slow. It's supposed to test you. That's how compounding filters out the impatient. It rewards those who can wait long enough to deserve the rewards. And once you get to that first 100,000, you'll look back and realize that the hard part wasn't the math. It was mastering yourself. The markets were never your enemy. Your impulses were. Once you cross that first 100,000, something inside you changes. It's not about pride. It's about perspective. For the first time, you can feel the force of compounding working with you instead of against you. You stop chasing every side hustle or new opportunity that promises instant wealth. You start thinking longer, calmer. You begin to understand that the wealthiest people aren't those who move fastest. They're the ones who move longest without quitting. Before you hit that number, every decision feels urgent. You worry about timing, headlines, every piece of economic news. But after, you realize that most of it doesn't matter. The noise fades. You stop checking your balance every day. You stop thinking in weeks and start thinking in decades. That's when you truly graduate from saver to investor. I've seen it happen countless times. Someone struggles for years to reach that $100,000 mark. Then, almost suddenly, their wealth begins to grow faster, not because the market changed, but because they did. Their habits matured. Their patience solidified. They learned the quiet art of not touching their money. That's the turning point few people talk about. The discipline to do nothing. Doing nothing sounds easy, but it's one of the hardest skills in finance. When you have little, you're desperate to do something, anything to make it grow. But once you have enough to let compounding work, your best move is often to step aside. That's the paradox of wealth. Success often requires restraint, not action. You can't force compounding to work faster. It's like gravity, steady, predictable, relentless. You can only ruin it by interfering. That's why the people who try to optimize every month's return often end up worse off than those who simply leave their investments alone. Impatience taxes you more than inflation ever could. When you reach your first 100,000, you realize that your job isn't to outsmart the market. It's to outlast your emotions, to stay rational when everyone else loses their balance. And once you've mastered that, every new dollar you earn feels lighter, easier, safer. Because now you're not guessing anymore, you're compounding on confidence. Let me put it this way. The first $100,000 is like climbing a hill in a storm. You're drenched, tired, slipping, and sometimes you wonder why you started at all. But when you reach the top and look back, you realize the worst is behind you. The next hill is gentler. The air feels clearer. You've learned how to climb. That's what money does after your first $100,000. It starts to carry some of the load. It starts working nights and weekends. It doesn't call in sick. It doesn't complain. You realize that while you were sleeping, your money earned something. Maybe it's a few dollars in dividends, maybe a few hundred in growth, but it's there. And that's when the real power of compounding stops being a theory. It becomes an experience. It's the first time you wake up and realize your money made money while you didn't lift a finger. It feels almost unfair. But it's not. It's just delayed justice. You've been putting in the effort for years. Now, finally, the system is returning the favor. And here's the thing. Once you taste that feeling, you never want to go back. You become allergic to waste. You start valuing time over toys. You stop caring about keeping up with anyone. Because now you know that freedom is just patience given enough time. I've said it before. The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. That isn't just a clever line. It's the whole game. And the first $100,000 is the price of entry. Once you've paid it in full, in time, discipline, and restraint, you're in the club. And in that club, compounding is the only currency that matters. Every extra dollar you save after that first 100,000 gets treated differently by time, because now it's being added to something that grows on its own. You're stacking on top of momentum, not starting from zero each month. That's why the next 100,000 comes faster, and the one after that even faster still. It's not a miracle. It's math. But math only works for the people who give it time to breathe. Think of it like a tree. The first 100,000 is planting the seed and waiting for it to sprout. Nothing seems to happen for years. You water, you protect, you wait. Then one day, the roots are deep enough that the tree starts growing on its own. You can see progress with your own eyes. That's compounding. It's invisible at first, undeniable later. And when that tree starts producing fruit, interest, dividends, returns, something inside you changes again. You stop working for money and start working with it. Your income stops being your only engine. You've built a second engine that never gets tired. That's when financial independence stops being a dream and starts becoming a direction. But don't misunderstand me. It's not that life suddenly becomes easy after $100,000. You'll still face setbacks, market dips, and self-doubt. The difference is you'll handle them differently. You'll stop reacting and start observing. You'll stop panicking when markets fall because you'll know from experience this is temporary and time fixes it. That's what makes the next stage easier. You've seen how the story plays out, And that familiarity gives you confidence. You no longer need motivation. You have proof. So the first $100,000, that's where you earn your stripes. It's where you learn the habits that can't be taught in books. And the next $100,000, that's when those habits start paying dividends, literally and figuratively. It's almost poetic, really. The market rewards patience the same way life does. Slowly, quietly, and only after you've proven you can handle it. I've seen thousands of investors over the years, and the pattern is always the same. The first 100,000 feels like trying to lift a mountain. Every small win feels erased by a bigger setback. You start to wonder if all those hours of discipline and saving are even worth it. But that's the illusion of early compounding. It hides its brilliance until it's ready to reward you. At the beginning, your progress is invisible because the numbers are small. 5% of 1,000 is 50. 5% of 100,000 is 5,000. That's why the first stage feels so cruel. The system demands your best behavior for the smallest reward. But that's how it weeds out the impulsive, the impatient, and the undisciplined. The market has always been fair. It just doesn't pay beginners right away.
Right.
But once you've proven that you can play the long game, it changes the rules. The math starts working in your favor. You begin to realize that compounding isn't just growth. It's momentum with memory. Every dollar you invest remembers the time it's been working, and each new dollar joins a growing army that never stops. That's why the next 100,000 feels easier. You're no longer starting from zero every January. Your money is working even when you aren't. Even a bad year doesn't erase your progress because the base you've built has gravity now. It attracts growth simply by existing. When I was young, I used to imagine wealth as something you chase, a finish line, a final number. But over the years, I realized it's not something you chase. It's something you build slowly until it starts chasing you. The money starts doing the running, not you. That's what the first 100,000 buys, the right to stop running. Most people never experience that switch. They stay stuck in the stage where every dollar must come from sweat and sacrifice. They never build enough of a base to see compounding in motion. That's why so many give up. They think the system is rigged, but it isn't. It's just slow. Once your investments start earning more than your monthly contributions, you'll understand what all the waiting was for. That's the inflection point. That's the moment you realize you've escaped gravity. You're no longer dragging wealth uphill, you're gliding. Let's say you saved $1,000 a month for 8 years and finally hit your $100,000 goal. Now, without changing a thing, the compounding begins to accelerate. That same 7% growth you've been barely noticing suddenly adds $7,000 in a single year. That's almost as much as you contributed in half a year of savings. And then the next year, it's $7,500, then $8,000, then $8,600. The snowball's rolling on its own. At that point, the biggest danger isn't failure, it's interference. You'll be tempted to tinker, to optimize, to chase slightly higher returns. But the secret to wealth is learning to leave well enough alone. You've done the hard part. Now let time do its work. People often say investing is about finding opportunities, but I've found it's more about avoiding interruptions. Every time you pull your money out of the market, you reset the clock. You kill the compounding. That's like planting a tree, waiting 5 years, and then digging it up to check if it's growing. It's foolish, but most people do it. The ones who win are the ones who stop interrupting their own success. They learn to stay calm when markets fall. They don't panic when others panic. They understand that volatility isn't the enemy. Emotion is. After your first 100,000, you stop being fragile because you finally understand that money doesn't vanish in bear markets. It transfers. It moves from the fearful to the patient, from those who check prices daily to those who check once a year, from those who need excitement to those who prefer boredom. And boredom, as unglamorous as it sounds, is the bedrock of wealth. If you can fall in love with monotony, the quiet act of doing the same thing month after month, you'll build what others can only dream of. Because the truth is, real wealth is invisible. It's not the new car or the designer watch. It's the quiet account that compounds while you're asleep. It's the freedom to wake up and decide what to do with your day. That's what the next 100,000 brings, not status, but stability. Once you cross that second 100,000, you'll feel something else. Relief. You'll realize that you're no longer vulnerable to every minor shock life throws your way. A broken appliance, a medical bill, an emergency, none of it derails you anymore. You're insulated. That's what money was always meant to be. Insulation, not inflation. You'll start to see wealth differently too. You'll stop seeing it as numbers on a screen and start seeing it as hours of freedom. You'll measure it in mornings without alarms, evenings without worry, and decisions made without fear. That's the wealth that compounds after the math is done. I've always said that the best investment isn't in stocks, it's in patience. And patience is built $1 at a time, one habit at a time, 100,000 at a time. The first milestone feels impossible, but once you've reached it, you realize the hardest part wasn't financial, it was psychological. You were fighting doubt, distraction, envy, and exhaustion. You weren't just saving money. You were saving your future self from panic. You were training your brain to handle abundance before it arrived. That's why it feels easier later. You've already done the hard rewiring. When you have no money, every decision feels like life or death. You hesitate, you overthink, you chase. When you have your first 100,000, decisions start feeling like choices, not chances. You become calmer, smarter, slower to react. That's what people mean when they say the rich get richer. They don't just have more money. They have more time, more patience, more calmness. It's not unfair. It's cumulative. They've earned their calm the same way you'll earn yours, one consistent habit at a time. So don't be discouraged by the early grind. It's supposed to feel uphill. It's supposed to feel lonely. That's what makes it valuable. Because when everyone else gives up, your discipline keeps working. And when the math finally flips, you'll be glad you kept going. I've often said that the journey to your first 100,000 teaches you more about yourself than any book or mentor ever could. It teaches you who you are when no one's watching. It exposes your relationship with time, temptation, and patience. It shows you whether you're capable of thinking long-term in a short-term world. That's why it's so hard and so necessary. When people ask me how to make the next 100,000 easier, I tell them the truth. It's not that the process changes, it's that you do. You evolve from someone chasing money to someone managing momentum. The stress disappears because the system starts compounding on its own. At the start, it's all willpower. Every meal you skip out, every impulse you resist, every dollar you save instead of spend, it's a fight against yourself. But later, it's no longer a fight. It's muscle memory. It's who you are. You don't have to think about saving anymore. You just do it. You don't get tempted by noise anymore. You just ignore it. You built a rhythm, and rhythm beats motivation every time. That's when you realize something profound. Wealth isn't really about accumulation. It's about automation. Once your habits take over, once your investments run themselves, the process becomes effortless. And effortlessness is the reward for those who were willing to endure effort for years. People who stop before 100,000 never experience that transition. They quit before the habits become identity. They'll always see saving as sacrifice instead of strategy. But those who cross that line never go back. They've seen the power of quiet consistency, and that power becomes addictive, not because of greed, but because of peace. Peace is what wealth was always supposed to buy. Not extravagance, not excess, just peace. The peace of knowing you're protected. The peace of knowing your future isn't at the mercy of chance. The peace of waking up and realizing you can make decisions for meaning instead of survival. The next 100,000 feels easy because you're finally building on peace instead of panic. You're no longer motivated by fear. You're motivated by clarity. You understand what's enough. You stop swinging for home runs and start protecting your base hits. And funny enough, that's when the home runs show up on their own. I've said it before, the market rewards temperament more than intelligence. The calm investor always wins because he can hold steady when everyone else is running scared. After your first 100,000, calmness becomes your greatest advantage. You've seen storms before. You know they pass. You've watched prices fall and rise again. You've learned that wealth isn't lost in bear markets. It's transferred to those who keep their heads. That's why the first 100,000 builds strength and the next builds wisdom. The struggle teaches you to survive. The compounding teaches you to thrive. Together, they make you unstoppable. Once you hit that stage, you start thinking differently about money itself. You stop seeing it as something to spend or hoard. You start seeing it as something to use, a tool for time, for freedom, for choices. You understand that money sitting in an account isn't doing much, but money put to work quietly compounds into options. And that's what the next 100,000 gives you, options. The option to change jobs, the option to take a risk, the option to help someone else without fearing for yourself. That's real wealth. The ability to make decisions free from desperation. People love to romanticize wealth as luxury, but the richest feeling on earth is stability. The ability to look at a problem and know you can handle it. The ability to breathe during chaos. The ability to plan without fear. That's the dividend of the second 100,000. Stability. It's also the point where gratitude starts replacing greed. When you were chasing your first 100,000, everything felt scarce. You saw every expense as a setback. You measured every dollar as loss or gain. But after you cross it, you begin to relax. You start realizing that enough is a moving target only if you keep moving it. You begin to find joy in small things, not because you've lost ambition, but because you've gained perspective. You don't need every month to be a record high. You just need steady progress. You don't need to impress anyone anymore. You just need to stay the course. That's the irony of success. You work so hard for control, and then you learn that letting go gives you more. You stop micromanaging every outcome. You stop obsessing over market movements. You start trusting the process you built. When you trust compounding, you gain something money can't buy. Patience without pain. Waiting no longer feels like suffering. It feels like strategy. That's when wealth stops being external and starts becoming internal. You're not chasing anymore. You're coasting on something you created with your own discipline. And when you see that next 100,000 arrive faster than the first, you'll smile. Not because of the number, but because of what it represents. Proof that time works. Proof that the grind was worth it. Proof that you're no longer climbing, you're cruising. You start understanding the deeper truth. The goal was never the number itself. It was the version of you that the process created. The kind of person who can delay gratification, stay calm, and think in decades. That's the person who doesn't just build wealth, they keep it. And here's what's beautiful. Once you become that person, every next step, the next 100,000, the next million feels inevitable. Not because the world got easier, but because you did. The people who never reach their first 100,000 think wealth is about tactics. The right stock, the right moment, the right piece of luck. But those who make it know the truth. Wealth isn't about tactics, it's about temperament. You can give the same portfolio to two people and end up with two entirely different outcomes. The impatient one will sabotage it. The patient one will multiply it. Same tools, different psychology. That's why the first 100,000 is the hardest. Because it's not about numbers, it's about rewiring your mind. You're teaching yourself to think like an owner, not an earner. Owners play long games. Earners chase short rewards. Once you've learned that distinction, every financial decision becomes easier. You stop caring about fast money. You start respecting slow power. You no longer crave constant excitement. You crave consistency. You begin to understand that boredom is not failure. It's the sound of progress. That's when compounding becomes a lifestyle, not a formula. After you hit $100,000, you stop overestimating how much you can do in a year and start underestimating how much you can do in 10. That's a shift only time can teach you. You stop rushing the process because you realize the process is the reward. You're not sprinting toward freedom anymore. You're walking toward it steadily, calmly, confidently, and walking feels better because it lasts. That's also the point where you realize something deeper. Wealth was never supposed to feel like pressure. It's supposed to feel like peace. You start seeing that every financial mistake you've made came from emotion, not logic. You wanted more too soon. You tried to predict instead of prepare. You confused noise for opportunity. But now you're different. You've developed financial immunity. You can hear market chaos and not flinch. You can read bad headlines and still go to bed early. You can lose a little and not lose your mind. That's what the next 100,000 gives you, emotional return. You start earning calmness instead of panic. And that calmness spreads to every part of your life. You stop arguing about money. You stop measuring your worth by your wealth. You stop trying to prove anything to anyone. You simply keep stacking dollars, habits, and years. That's how quiet wealth is built. One boring, consistent, beautifully uneventful day at a time. I've watched friends chase every new trend, real estate booms, tech bubbles, crypto surges, and lose the one thing that truly mattered, patience. They traded stability for stimulation. And stimulation, no matter how exciting, always comes with a crash. The patient ones, they just kept compounding, quietly, predictably, until one day they looked rich to everyone else, but to themselves, they just looked peaceful. You see, after that first 100,000, the difference between the successful and the restless becomes painfully clear. The restless still think the goal is more. The successful realize the goal is enough. Enough is the word that ends financial anxiety. It's not a number. It's a state of mind. And you find it not when you hit a certain balance, but when you understand that freedom comes from control, not consumption. Half the world is chasing an image of wealth that doesn't even exist. Vacations, cars, brand names. The other half, the quiet half, is building the kind of wealth no one sees. Peace, health, time, choice. That's the half you want to belong to. And the first 100,000 is your ticket in. Because once you reach it, the entire philosophy of your life changes. You stop being reactive and start being selective. You stop thinking, can I afford this? And start thinking, does this make sense? You stop trading your time for every dollar and start trading your dollars for better time. That's the invisible upgrade nobody talks about. The way wealth changes your relationship with time itself. The richer you get in money, the poorer you should get in hurry. Because hurry is the enemy of compound growth. Every time you rush, you rob the future. Every time you wait, you invest in it. That's what makes the next 100,000 feel effortless. You've trained yourself to wait. You've learned to be patient long enough for the magic to work. You no longer chase every new idea. You let your old ones mature. You understand that trees don't grow faster when you yell at them. When you live that way long enough, your portfolio starts to feel like an old friend. You trust it. You know how it behaves. You stop micromanaging it. And that trust frees your mind to focus on better things, like learning, health, relationships, or peace. That's the real secret. The richer you become, the less your mind should be on money. The purpose of wealth isn't obsession, it's release. It's the ability to think about life again, to live instead of chase. After that, everything compounds. Your income, your knowledge, your patience, your perspective. It all grows faster because your energy is no longer divided. You're not trapped in cycles of fear or greed anymore. You're grounded. That's when you finally understand why the first 100,000 was so hard, and why the rest will always be easier. The climb wasn't meant to make you rich. It was meant to make you ready. Read enough stories of self-made people and you'll start to notice the same rhythm, the struggle, the plateau, and then the effortless rise. The first chapter is always chaos. Every dollar saved feels like pulling teeth. Every setback feels personal. Then, somewhere after that first 100,000, a strange calm appears. You begin to realize the climb was never against the market. It was against your own impatience. When you finally win that inner battle, money becomes predictable. The rules don't change anymore. They just repeat.
Wait.
Save.
Wait.
Repeat. Over and over, like breathing. And the strangest thing happens. You stop wanting shortcuts. You start to like the slowness because you can see it working. Watching compounding feels like watching the tide come in. It's quiet, steady, unstoppable. That's when you know you've crossed the threshold. You no longer measure wealth in months or even years. You think in decades. You start asking different questions. Not how can I make more, but how can I keep what I have working safely for longer? You move from ambition to architecture, building systems that protect your time instead of consume it. That's what the next 100,000 really represents. Design. You're not improvising anymore. You're deliberate. You understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your limits. You know what kind of investor you are. You stop comparing portfolios and start optimizing patience. And as your money grows, so does your humility. Because you realize how much of wealth is just survival. Staying invested, staying calm, staying out of trouble. You don't need to outsmart everyone. You just need to outlast them. That's why so few reach the stage of effortless growth. They get bored, distracted, overconfident. They start thinking they're geniuses after a few good years. But compounding punishes arrogance. The moment you think you can't lose is the moment you start to. The ones who endure are the ones who stay students, no matter how much they earn. When I was young, I'd watch people around me chase every new idea. Real estate, options, gold, whatever the flavor of the month was. I didn't chase. I just kept doing the same thing, buying pieces of good businesses and holding them. Decades later, the difference was night and day. They had stories. I had dividends. That's why I tell people, don't seek excitement in your portfolio. Seek excitement in your life. Let your money be the calm part. Let it be boring, dependable, predictable, because the more boring your finances become, the more interesting your days can be. After that first 100,000, you begin to grasp the real reward of financial independence. It's not early retirement. It's emotional independence. You stop being controlled by headlines, bosses, politics, or fear. You realize that freedom isn't walking away from work. It's walking away from worry. You start to understand why people say money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy time. And time is what happiness needs to breathe. You can't enjoy anything when you're rushing or panicking. The next 100,000, the next million, they all give you more oxygen, more space to live deliberately. But let's not pretend it happens overnight. There will still be days of doubt. You'll still feel impatient sometimes. You'll still wonder if you're doing enough. The difference is you'll now have proof to quiet those doubts. You'll look at your compounding curve and realize it's not luck anymore. It's inevitability. That's the comfort you earn. You start trusting the math more than your moods. You realize that time has never failed a disciplined investor, only the ones who quit early. The same patience that built your first 100,000 will carry you through everything that follows. Recessions, crashes, corrections, they'll all feel like noise now. And as your perspective widens, you stop seeing wealth as something to hoard. You start thinking in terms of legacy. Not legacy in the dramatic sense, not statues or buildings with your name, but the quiet kind. The example you set, the stability you pass on, the lessons your kids or friends absorb just by watching you live calmly when everyone else panics. That's the hidden dividend of discipline. It multiplies through example. Your habits become contagious. People start asking you how you stay so composed, so secure, so unbothered. And you smile because you know the answer is simple. You did the hard part early. You built your base while everyone else was buying distractions. You learned to enjoy simplicity again. You realize that what makes life rich isn't more money, it's less noise. You'd rather have a quiet portfolio than a loud lifestyle. You'd rather have enough than endless ambition. And then something remarkable happens. The same people who once thought you were too cautious start asking you for advice. The same friends who mocked your frugality start wishing they'd done the same. Because now they see it. The compounding they laughed at is finally visible. And you, the boring investor, are the one still standing. The next 100,000 isn't just easier, it's sweeter. Because now you understand every dollar story. You remember what it took to earn it, to protect it, to multiply it. You respect it in a way that impulsive people never will. And money, like anything respected, stays loyal to the people who treat it well. There's a moment that comes after years of consistency. It doesn't arrive with confetti or noise. It just slips quietly into your life. You wake up one morning, check your balance, and realize something. Your money now earns more than you do. It's subtle, but it changes everything. The game is over. You won. You're no longer pushing. You're gliding. The effort you put in years ago is now paying you back with interest. You don't have to stress over every paycheck anymore. You don't have to make desperate choices. You don't even need to chase opportunity. Opportunity now finds you. That's the real reward of getting past the first 100,000. You built a machine that keeps moving without your permission. And the beauty of it is how quietly it operates. It doesn't demand your attention. It doesn't argue or complain. It just grows quietly, faithfully, mathematically. Most people never reach that point because they confuse movement with progress. They're constantly shifting, trading, upgrading, reacting. They can't sit still long enough for time to do its work. But time doesn't reward movement. It rewards stillness. The still investor is the rich one. That stillness is also what gives you power. You no longer need to rush decisions. You can pause. You can think. You can walk away from bad deals because you don't need them. You can say no without guilt. That's real wealth, the freedom to say no. And here's the secret no one tells you. After your first 100,000, after your second, the external rewards, the houses, the numbers, the admiration, they all fade. What stays is internal. It's a feeling of quiet certainty, a knowing that you've built something solid, something that doesn't shake when the world does. Yeah. It's not about more anymore. It's about maintaining peace. It's about protecting the simplicity that got you here. Because success has a way of making people forget what built it. They start adding complexity, noise, new ventures, new risks. But the ones who stay wealthy are the ones who resist that temptation. They don't complicate what works. They keep it simple, boring, and profitable. When I look back at my own journey, I don't remember the big jumps or the big wins. I remember the quiet years, the waiting, the patience, the conviction when no one else believed it would work. That's where wealth was built. Not in the moments of celebration, but in the long stretches of silence when nothing seemed to be happening. That's why I tell people, fall in love with the process, not the result. Because the result always arrives too late to matter if you didn't enjoy the process. The process of saving, of watching your investments grow, of learning patience, that's the real wealth. Money is just the evidence. And once you reach that understanding, the cycle continues on its own. Every 100,000 becomes a little easier, not because the numbers changed, but because you did. You've learned the art of enough. You've learned that security isn't something you buy, it's something you build inside yourself. The people who keep chasing after that will never find it because they're chasing the wrong thing. They think the next milestone will finally make them feel safe, but safety doesn't come from more. It comes from discipline, from the ability to stop moving the finish line. When you truly internalize that lesson, your relationship with money transforms. You stop checking prices and start checking purpose. You don't ask, what can I buy with this? You ask, what kind of life can this sustain? You move from consumer to creator, from spender to steward. And when you live that way long enough, wealth stops being about you entirely. It becomes something you pass on. Not just the money, but the mindset. The way you treat time, patience, and peace becomes your real inheritance to others. The world doesn't need more rich people. It needs more calm ones. Calm investors build stable families. Stable families build strong communities. Strong communities build better worlds. That's how something small as your first 100,000 can echo far beyond your lifetime. It's never just about money. It's about what money teaches you. Discipline, perspective, gratitude. So yes, the first 100,000 is hard, brutally hard. It's slow, it's quiet, and it feels like you're running in place while everyone else sprints past you. But it's supposed to be that way. It's the price of admission for freedom. Once you've paid it, everything else accelerates. The second 100,000 will take half the time. The third, even less. And somewhere along the way, you'll stop caring about the number. You'll just be grateful you kept going. Because that's the secret all long-term investors discover at the end. The reward for patience isn't just money, it's peace. Peace in knowing you didn't need to gamble, you didn't need to rush, and you didn't need to be perfect. You just needed to keep showing up. The first 100,000 makes you disciplined. The next 100,000 makes you calm. And after that, every new dollar becomes less about accumulation and more about appreciation. You start living lighter. You start wanting less. You stop chasing and start enjoying. And one day, quietly, naturally, almost without noticing, you realize you've reached the point everyone dreams of, but few truly experience. Enough to live, enough to give, enough to rest. And when you reach that, you understand what real wealth has always been. Not the size of your account, but the absence of anxiety. That's why the first 100,000 is so hard, and why everyone after that feels like breathing.